So I just walked out and looked outside, and I looked out at my car. I was like, you gotta be fucking kidding me.
Your message, how the fuck is there milk in my car?
That was my exact attitude.
Pasha la vid, vi podcast Dylan i Joe, padva laim, me vasha hashe Dylan i Joe. Welcome to the Dylan and Joe Basement Podcast. We're your hosts, Basement Dylan
and Comrade Joe. Pripyat, everybody. Спасибо for tuning in to another episode of the Dylan Joe Basement Podcast. We very much appreciate you tuning in today.
Pripyat all our fans. All of our fans.
What are we talking about today, comrade?
Today, comrade, we are talking about abandoned Russian shit. If humans have created things, Russia has abandoned them. And we're going to inform you of multiple different pieces of abandoned Russian infrastructure as well as Russian technology.
Absolutely. That's what we're talking about today, folks. I mean, there's so much shit left behind from Russia over the years, especially when they were the USSR, and when you have the largest conglomeration of countries in the entire planet, and the thing falls apart, a lot of pieces get left behind, and no one wants to pick up that shit. So that's a lot of what we're going to be talking about today.
Yep, no one's picking it up. It's just staying there. A lot of times it'll go to a museum, aka a field full of other things.
AK-47, you mean?
Alan Kalashnikov. Started into space shuttles, giant holes, fucking submarines, cities, nuclear shit, fucking you name it. It's fucking gone. It's just there, but it's not working.
Still there. No one's keeping track of the shit. It's still up behind. I mean, you get the biggest country on the planet by a pretty big margin is Russia, and they got plenty of room for this shit. So when we talk about Russia today and Russia of old is that big piece that's in the only country we really consider is in two continents. It's in Northern Asia and also Northeastern Europe. But when we talk about Russia today, we're kind of using it simultaneously with the USSR, also known as the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, which started up in 1922 after the Russian Revolution. They wanted to give the means of production to the workers. Didn't work out perfectly that way. As you see, sometimes in history, things kind of get a little twisted. You get a couple of main leaders who start making things red and changing ideas. Within that time period, and post-World War II, it turned into this giant conglomeration of countries that were all under the same red umbrella, comrade. And they not only countries that were in Eastern Europe, but also countries that were in Western Asia were involved there, consisting of 16 modern-day nations altogether. They've been split up differently after the fall of the USSR, so they weren't actually the same name before and afterwards, but mostly made up of Lithuania, Georgia, Estonia, Latvia, Ukraine, Belarus, Moldova, Kyrgyzstan, Uzbekistan, Tajikistan, Turkmenistan, Kazakhstan, famous made for Borat, Chechnya, famously for the Boston bomber was from, Armenia, famous for System of a Down, Azerbaijan, famous for currently invading Armenia under the guise of helping them. And, of course, the big daddy bear of them all, Russia, which is still a very powerful nation that wants to get all those back, in my opinion. I know they don't say it publicly, but they would love to get them back. For example, recently in the past decade invading Georgia again, and also invading Ukraine and taking over Crimea again. So they are definitely not done holding on to their old allies there, or subjects, as it were. But in 1991, thanks to a large domino effect of all different kinds of things happening, with cultures changing, money running out, and all different kinds of economic struggles, the USSR fell to pieces. And when it did, a lot of these states that we now know became independent in their own nations. And when that happens, and the benefactor and the big daddy pulls out, it's not always a clean breakup, and a lot of shit got left behind, whether it was, like you said, structures or vehicles or even whole villages and towns worth of people. They get left behind, and people don't want to clean up the pieces. There's no one to pay for it, and there's no incentive to do it. And a lot of these countries are not very well off after the fall of the republic, but they end up being independent. So that's where we start our story here, with all the shit that they left behind. We're going to talk about today.
Oh man, you mentioned Belarus. I don't know why I said this, or what comedian or joke or TV, but I am Olaf from Belarus. Life was going okay till brother eaten by a wolf, and I get to move here to America. Like, that's the type of things that you hear from people, like nonchalant, brother eaten by a wolf. These just tough motherfuckers who just deal with war, cold,
famine. Yeah, it's hard living.
And they're just tough. I mean, like, watch a documentary about the old plane behind me, aka the Caspian Sea Monster, and these pilots are just these like hard fucking men who drink a lot of vodka in like brightly lit fluorescent bulbed like one room plate. Like, just there's just ridiculous group of people, and I just am
brutal.
I've been fascinated by Russia since day one. I want to go there. One of my cousins, who's actually in the army, he took Russian forever. My aunt was in the NSA as a Russian linguist, so I have a good connection to Russian stuff.
Interesting.
It's fucking fascinating.
Yeah, it's a really interesting place, all said and done. I'm not sure if I'm so inclined to go there like you are. I think I can put a couple countries down on my list before I decide to go to Russia, just because of a lot of the things mentioned above. But it's definitely a fascinating place that I'd love to learn about, and a lot of cool shit going on.
Train for the Olympics at what was it, Moscow? Where was the
Sochi?
Olympics? Sochi, yeah. And everybody in the hotels had to worry about stray fucking wolf dogs running around biting them. How fucking funny is that? Like, oh, we have this like amazing, we're like coming back,
multi-billion-dollar investment.
But they can't
wild dogs.
The dog problem. So you're like an American who's 18 years old, and you're like this like shelter.
Yeah, they were afraid they weren't going to have enough places that were fully heated and everything, even though it was
exactly. Like, the bugs, the this, the that.
There was all kinds of problems. But that's kind of, as we go through our tale today, that's kind of par for the course. As much as Russia has got a lot of money and a lot of bluster, they like to cut a lot of corners when it comes to the common man, and it makes for some harsh folks and some harsh realities. Exactly. All for one for all mentality doesn't usually end up that everyone's lifted all together. Everyone has to sacrifice together. Unlike a rising tide lifts all boats, but a sinking tide brings them all down, and a lot of people got brought down.
So, all right, well, I'm going to go first on my list here, because it's not the most impressive thing that we have here, but don't suck either. So what we got here is the Korabel Maket, the KM, aka literally means ship prototype, also colloquially known as the Caspian Sea Monster.
Caspian Sea Monster.
Behind me, right here, if you can see, this is the Caspian Sea Monster.
Looks like a behemoth of a ship.
That's where you're half right. So the Caspian Sea Monster was an experimental ground effects vehicle, also known as an ekranoplane, like EKR, whatever fuck plane.
What does that mean?
What it means is that there's a certain threshold of efficiency that let me move my thing over here so I don't keep looking in space. So there's a threshold for efficiency in flight when you're close to the ground. So
okay, so low flying.
low flying using ground effects. So if you are an airplane and you have wings, because that's what an airplane has, um, and you're going close to the ground, the air off of the airplane pushes back, and you can almost, if you do it right, it
Ah,
puts this like cushion of air that you kind of float on. And
nice.
there's something again way above my pay level, in my life, but it also is more efficient to fly that way too.
Hmm.
It's like this weird efficiency thing. So like they designed the Chronoplan, aka this one specifically, the Caspian Sea Monster. And there's a couple different models of them. As a by the Central Hydrofoil Design Bureau in 1960s, to transport cargo across the Caspian Sea. So it would fly efficiently at like 250 miles an hour, but some believe that it was tested up to close to 500.
Damn.
500 miles an hour within 30 feet of the ground.
And so it's flying over the water. Is it able to land in the water too? Is that why that?
100% land based, oh, sorry, water based thing. So
Gotcha. So it's basically like a super fast cargo ship.
Mhm.
Instead of using a cargo ship or a jetliner, you could use like a hybrid of the two.
Exactly. And up until I think it was 1988, this was the largest airplane in the world, heaviest airplane in the world. And
I
it
can't
was,
imagine what surpassed it. That thing looks like a complete behemoth behind me. Look at all those turbines just on the one wing there, or what used to be.
yeah. So,
Or not on the wing, rather, on the side of the nose almost.
yeah, they're up in the front there because it kind of like,
Gotcha.
with the water and whatever. I don't know, but like I don't really know why the design is the way it is exactly. But yeah, massive giant tail. Obviously the wings are just designed to push air down as best as possible, typical airfoil. And yeah, it was the largest and heaviest aircraft in the world from 1966 to 1988, and it was superseded by one of the coolest airplanes of all time. Guess what country it's from?
Also Russia.
Also Russia.
That's great. What is it?
The Antonov 225,
Mm,
which is still in flight today, and
no
every now
shit.
and then you'll see one in Bangor, Maine, because it's still used as it's a cargo plane.
Wow.
There was a Antonov like 125 that landed at Pease Air Force Base in New Hampshire last month that I just missed, but they're painted white and yellow, and the 225 has 3 engines on each side,
Mm.
is bigger than a C5 Galaxy by like a good chunk. Um,
And
pretty
does that use the same method of travel? I can't go across the whole Atlantic flying that low, can it? Or does
No,
it?
no, it's a jet. It
It's a
serves
full
an
jet airplane.
identical function as the C5 Galaxy does.
Gotcha.
It's just bigger, and
Wow.
and actually it might have. We'll get into this, but it also ties into another piece of abandoned Russian stuff. Not an abandoned 225, but an abandoned space shuttle. And
Mm.
the Antonov 225 was a
Very
transport.
interesting, comrade. Also, the Caspian Sea, it's going to come up again. It's on the off the eastern shore of Ukraine there, but it's actually completely landlocked, unlike other seas that are parts of the ocean that are named because of the land around them. The Caspian Sea is actually in the middle of the continent, so it's actually not open ocean. So it makes sense that you want to travel across it quickly rather than using the usual cargo ships. You don't want to have your entire fleet stacked in the middle of an admittedly very large body of water, but nothing like the size of the Atlantic Ocean or Pacific.
Yeah, exactly. It's just a quick to and from, like
Hmm.
you said, makes perfect sense. And this was, we had spies in Russia in the 60s and 70s and whatever it is because we knew that something was going on here and we thought that this was much more threatening than it was. So the
Hmm.
US was all over this damn thing trying to get, spy photos of it and all that
It
stuff.
certainly looks fucking scary.
It looks terrifying, and it's you could see it in like dry dock and they're like, what on earth is that thing? Like,
Probably thinking the thing's full of bombs and shit or whatever
yeah,
else.
yeah, exactly.
Tanks.
And it had some good feats is that like it always flew under the altitude of detection from radar.
That's
Um,
it. I didn't even think about that when you mentioned its flying style. That's a good move
yeah,
too.
so being imagine this the biggest thing freaking you've ever seen going 400 miles an hour,
It's
which again is more of
cruising,
its
absolutely
max
cruising.
speed. You'd be like that close to the ground. You'd be like, what on earth? And like the like it's just so weird. Like
Yeah,
one of
you
those
have to
things that
figure
like we weren't
it
doing this.
you have to figure that if it counts, I don't know what the technicality is, but if you count it as a cargo ship, it must be probably the fastest cargo ship of all time to be that going that fast over the
Yeah.
water. Like any cargo ship now, even the speediest ones in modern day, would not go 500 miles an hour. It's not.
Yeah, no, for sure. They go more like 4.
Yeah, yeah, it's
4 to
just
15 or something.
they're
30.
massive. I mean, even the tinier ones can probably go faster than that, but they wouldn't even be able to break 100. Those big fucking things.
Speedboats barely break 100 because they just
and those are just made just to go fast. So I mean,
yeah,
it's wild.
Crazy. So 2 cool facts about this is that the first test flights were done by the designers, which is not typically the way it goes in aviation.
Reminds me of the Spruce Goose with Howard Hughes in that aspect.
100%, very similar. Like they just said, all right, well, we're going to give it a shot. We built it. Let's see what happens. And they didn't die.
You got to love that, though. The guy who designed it, trying to test pilot it, that means you got faith in your design, and also you're not putting other people at risk for your plans.
Whatever. Yeah, exactly. So that's pretty cool. And second, so as of 2020, I can't get any more record. This still sitting well,
I mean, made it this far. I can't imagine they scrapped it unless they had a lot of time during the coronavirus.
They had different ones, and one of them crashed and is at the bottom of the ocean. And they realized we just can't get it.
It's nuts.
Not
no
happening.
Way. Yeah.
It's like pulling up the Titanic.
I was just gonna say, why don't you yank the Titanic out while you're down there?
Exactly. So they're like, all right, well, that's where that's gonna go.
Just stays
and then
there.
It's in some sort of like a dry dock. We'll pull up some pictures here, and Joe, I'll send you links to all this stuff so you don't have to Google like the fucking name of this thing.
Sure.
It's in some sort of a dry dock looking abandoned shithole fucking port thing. Like it's just something that people have to like work around. It's not a field. It's not somewhere convenient. It's just like this is something that is.
It's a monolith now. It's part of the landscape.
It's a monolith. It's never going anywhere. This is where we're at here. So that's last I knew of it in 2020. It was sitting in some fucking dock somewhere.
That's pretty awesome.
Yeah. Well, so love that thing. And they had like a successor to this that was called the Loon class chronoplan, also called Project 903. That they used all the way through the 90s.
Wow. So this thing wasn't really a failure. It was a complete success. No. It's just as soon as the thing is out of commission, the best thing to do with it is just let it reside where it dies, I guess.
Yeah. No, yeah, for real. And like like we said, there's an efficient. The whole point of it is there's a couple things, but the main thing is it's a cheaper way to get shit somewhere. It's more efficient at a certain speed on gas and that type of stuff. So.
Wow.
Yeah. One of them's just laying. The one that we're looking at right behind me. It was built in 1975, and it just sits right there, right off the shore of the city of Derbent. So if anyone's around Derbent in the near future, taking your Spirit flight out to fucking Russia,
I can't imagine if you're in Derbent that you wouldn't want to go see this thing. It might be the only tourist attraction in town. Besides the local pub.
Yeah, I mean, if there's things like this there, just keep your eyes fucking open because there's probably something else. And if we're looking at big shit that's abandoned, imagine the small weird things that you see, like nuclear powered fucking lawnmowers or something. I don't know. Like,
yeah, who knows? Be safe. Bring a Geiger counter with you.
Yeah, seriously. But the cool thing is, man, I don't know. It looks like a nice beach to me, and that's always cool. You're sitting in your beach chair, just chilling in the sun. Cool to see. Watching the girls and fucking others and submarine surfacing, and then there's just this thing.
It's the shit.
Good time. I think it's cool. I hope to go to Derbent sometime just to go see this.
Absolutely. The first on my list is also a maritime vehicle. This one's actually a whaling schooner. We're going to go from the western side of the continent all the way across to the far eastern side of it on almost the most eastern part of Russia, to the point where you can almost see Alaska over here. This is off of the peninsula called Kamchatka. So that's basically the part that's right north of Japan, which is basically a really good whaling port during the golden age of whaling before we purged the seas of all of our water allies there, the whales. A lot of places have made it illegal to go whaling now, which tanked a lot of the whaling industry and a lot of... yeah, I know. I'm totally okay with it. But a lot of it's been going that way. So this is actually a ship that was beached on the bay and the Sea of Okhotsk, which is that sea that's in between Japan and Russia there, that peninsula. So there's a big old schooner that's been beached up along that peninsula since that time, way back when whaling was a huge part of the market share. And it was surrounded by a bunch of villages that basically sustained themselves by the whaling trade and harvesting whales for all the goods that they're available for. But when that dried up, so did that peninsula. And most of the villages around there are completely abandoned, along with any want or need to pull up this schooner. So this thing, I'll bring the picture up, it's just sitting there on the side rusting. This big, massive boat just on a beach, and it's never going to be moved ever. It's just been sitting there for God knows how long.
God, that's cool.
And there it shall remain. So this one, not exactly lined up with any USSR related events, but more about the whaling industry going downhill, and therefore anything left behind is going to stay there, especially a giant ship that's beached.
Gotta love those giant ships that are beached. I've seen some pretty cool ones too, where they end up turning them into like floating islands. So
that'd be cool. This one looks like you get a tetanus shot just to look at it. It looks like really rusted up piece of shit.
Love that. That's one of my favorite things.
Really that seawater can't be doing much good for it at this point either, spraying up against there for decades upon decades. Cool looking though from the outside perspective.
Yeah, I can't wait to take a look at it. Sometimes when I reflect on episodes before I have to record them for our podcasts, I come over here with a Be Hoppy. Makes the experience hoppier. Brought to you by our sponsors, Wormtown Brewery. All right, so next topic of discussion is the Buran project.
Never heard of it.
Possibly the most expensive abandoned shit on the menu today.
Oh boy. Sounds delicious.
This is the right. This yummy abandoned Buran project. Space shuttles, multiple of them, abandoned, fucking just sitting there.
Holy shit! The Soviet space program.
Soviet space program, and the Buran project specifically was by far their most expensive space project. Past the Sputnik wasn't shit compared to this. Like wow. This is serious. So. And this particular part of the space race was obviously, it was from like the 70s to the early 90s. Basically, till everything we talk about was.
Till they ran out of cash.
Yeah, exactly. Till they literally ran out of gas.
Wow.
The craziest thing is that they knew that Russia, as always, goes the United States is winning the space race. And they care about this.
They were off to a good start, though, getting the first man in space and the first orbiting spacecraft. I mean, they had a good head start there, but then the U.S. just started running haymakers for the next 10 years, and it started to look bad after that.
Yep, exactly. So Russia decides to make it about national security, and they realize the U.S. is going to be able to have weapons in space, and they're going to use them against Russia and the whole usual set of bullshit. So
we're still worried about that sort of thing today. So it makes sense.
Yeah,
to
exactly.
About it then.
So they created the Buran project to create multiple space shuttles that look just like the ones that we use.
Mm-hmm. Except they have a bear on the side and they have the hammer and sickle and the nose cone.
Exactly. So yeah, pretty much. So the usual ones. It's the the ones with the tiles on the outside, like the Challenger, like that. It's the same, like that type of space.
Yeah, the heat-resistant tiles.
Yeah, they look just like that, and they decided that the goal of these was to have a 30-ton payload to orbit capacity, and most significantly, a 15-ton payload return capacity. And what that means is this was a clear indication that this gets crazy, that its main objective would be to place massive laser weapons into orbit so they could destroy U.S. missiles from a distance of, from space.
That's fucking awesome.
Yeah. So if you look at them, just like ours, the back opens up like this, and shit has to come out of it.
And then a fucking death ray comes out the back of it.
Space death laser comes out of it. So you got to think there's no besides nuclear technology, there is no finer level of technological advancements going on at that time besides putting lasers into space from space shuttles. And now, if
That's
you,
the height of modernization right there. That's
yep,
sci-fi shit, but it really happened.
yep. So that's the background of the Buran project. And if you have a massive pair of fucking balls, you can go to Kazakhstan and because as we know,
Their home
Kazakhstan,
country.
Kazakhstan is where the space shuttle
Exactly.
lands because it's just no fucking nothing. It's like
Nothing there. You can just so much room to land.
it's so much room to land, and it
Kind
just
of like how ours land in Florida. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. That's where the launch is from.
and Kazakhstan is it doesn't make sense to me because I'm just not. I don't. There's a certain level of understanding that I don't have, but Kazakhstan is in like the perfect location to make it easier to get into space and out of space. It's like
Interesting.
I don't even know. Like a soccer ball has a certain point that's just gravity. I don't fucking the orbit transfers. It just makes the whole thing easier or something. I don't know. But anyway, so Kazakhstan's a good place.
Come on, Dylan. This isn't rocket science. What don't you get about
It's not brain surgery.
it?
So, yeah. So it's this set of hangars that is still part of a military base in Kazakhstan. But,
So you can't actually go visit unless you're real sneaky.
they didn't say it was illegal on the thing that I watched, and there's a group of guys in their 30s and 20s who like just got in a car and drove for days, went camping, had some weird experiences.
Oh, nice.
And slept inside of the hangar with the space shuttle.
So okay, so yeah,
Yeah.
I guess if you're dedicated, you more than enough time on your hands, you can definitely go see that. That sounds awesome.
They just climb into it and start just like checking shit out. It's crazy. So the interesting thing is because of the fall of the Soviet Union, only one of them actually flew, and only one of them actually went to space. So the ones that are abandoned in these hangars are like 70% complete. So they're missing something.
But they're still there. The actual shuttles themselves. I thought it was just the hangars left behind, but there's partial shuttles there too.
Oh yeah, they look like full shuttles. I mean, there's
Holy
nothing
shit.
crazy. And one of them actually is at a. It's. I think it might be the same town that the.
That Borat grew up in.
Yeah, right. Specifically the Buran K1 Orbiter. No, sorry. I'll get to that in a second. There's another one that's not in a hangar, but it's sitting at a like kids fucking play park.
Nice.
Like
Let the kids play.
Side. And you can see it from the water where I believe this is located. So like down the fucking street a bit is this, and then there's one of the space shuttles just in there's like a roller coaster, and then there's like a space shuttle.
Sweet.
And it's like just like that, just like all the abandoned airplanes, submarines, fucking your boat, whatever it is, they all are like just
out there.
Park them. They don't. There's no committee to preserve history. They're just getting rained on and fucking bird.
You can go see it, but we're not gonna make it any easier for you. It's just there.
Yeah,
so
it's probably still just
fucking have at it if you want to make the trek. If you want to drive for 3 days across Kazakhstan just to go see that shit, I think that you deserve to see it at that point.
Yeah, they'll probably send a wolf to go fucking bite your penis off if you.
Wolverine is guarding it, living there inside
like
the fucking
physically
shuttle.
harmed if you fuck it up, but that's about it for preservation. So anyway, so there's one in a park again, I believe in this town, and then the Buran K1 Orbiter is gone, and I don't know why it's gone. Well, I don't know like why they couldn't have just left it fucked up. So it was it was actually the only one that went to space, and it was unmanned, so it did go to space with no humans on it.
Interesting.
And then
I'm guessing there's no lasers left behind there at that point. They're just the shuttles.
Right. I didn't see any evidence of lasers when I was watching these videos.
Yeah, they probably would put those in last because it's sensitive information to be able to what do you call that? Reverse engineer the lasers.
Mm-hmm. Yep, exactly. I was wrong. The one in the amusement park is at the Gorky Park in Moscow.
Gorky Park. So they actually did take that one and they said this one is a good one. We're bringing it back.
Yeah, it's still fucked up and all faded and stuff, but it's at Gorky Park in Moscow. You can go check that out. So
nice. That one might be a little bit easier to see than going into Kazakhstan, but
I think so. Moscow is definitely easier than
you can land a plane in Moscow. I know that much.
That's true. You could today probably go to Moscow. I'm certain of that. Yep.
Yeah. Well, I don't know about today just because coronavirus, but any other day for sure they'd let you in.
Yeah. So, um, so my whole point is that so it's sad news. The Buran K1 Orbiter, in 1989 it took place in the Paris Air Show.
Really?
Yeah, they put, as mentioned earlier, because I'm coming full circle, the Antonov AN-225 carrier.
Cargo plane.
So the giant cargo plane strapped on the K1 to the back of it. Yeah.
Great success.
Great success. Very, very nice.
Very nice. Very big.
So it was a strap-on space shuttle on the back of the largest airplane in the world, and they flew at the Paris Air Show.
How could they ever get that thing out? It's like one of those things we talked about in the past. Like, how is that thing getting off the ground? Science is amazing.
I don't understand. They do it with the seven.
It's like flying a fucking skyscraper. It's unbelievable.
I don't understand. I mean, we did the same shit too with the 747. We had a
Oh yeah, I've seen that.
Yeah. So that was the last time it actually flew around, and then they had it at it was in a hangar at Baikonur Cosmodrome in Kazakhstan, and
the Cosmodrome.
Yep, and as always, it was suspended due to a lack of funds, and the political situation wasn't great. It was I think it was 2002. Yep, it was on May 12th, 2002. The roof of the Cosmodrome collapsed because of a structural failure because it wasn't maintained, and
probably wasn't the best original design either. Probably made to be
something,
single-use pony there.
German reinforced concrete here that still stands.
Of course, you have to maintain any old building, but a lot of these Soviet time buildings were not exactly made with the intention of lasting for 100+ years and looking beautiful. Just get the thing up there. If it's up, it's up.
Yep.
We'll worry about that shit later, or we won't.
Yep. So it killed 8 workers and destroyed the K1.
Oh man, I didn't know there were people in there when it happened. That's
bummer.
Awful. Yeah.
And that one's gone. So the only one that actually went to space was it's toast. And I don't know how you dispose of that now. I think they would just go, well, it collapsed, and
if we're learning anything about this, and then they probably just fucking left it there with all the bodies in there.
I would think, just now, how do you get rid of dismantling that? I saw them,
it would be very expensive project.
It takes years.
Yeah, it would take forever.
Burner,
but instead they just say, fucking leave it.
Mm-hmm.
That's interesting.
So there are space shuttles in Russia, and as we mentioned, one in Moscow. But specifically, the crazy shit you can go jump all over is in Kazakhstan.
And I think even wilder in the story is that they weren't built just to go, bringing up things to the International Space Station. They were built to drop lasers off in orbit and shoot down ICBMs. So that's some wild shit.
Yeah, exactly.
That is some wild shit. Who would have thought that we'd be such good pals now that we all hang out on the ISS together, Russians and Americans alike? And I'm sure they
crazy times.
Smiling away, boys.
Yep. Smiling away.
So it goes. My next one on the list is actually our first building besides the Cosmodrome, which is the coolest name for a building I've heard before. This one's a torpedo testing facility, and it actually looks almost like an oil derrick because it's out on the Caspian Sea. It's completely surrounded by water, but it's this giant structure with a big tower on it. Bring up the picture here, and they used it to test torpedo designs during the Cold War, essentially. Nice. And like we already spoke about the Caspian Sea earlier, it's east of Ukraine there, and they're probably flying the Caspian Sea Monster by this torpedo center during the time when they were using it and shipping across the sea. And much like the rest of the things on our list here, when the USSR fell, there was no need to maintain this facility anymore. I'm sure that they still do plenty of Russian torpedo testing now. They do it at a different location, though, since the facility was technically in Dagestan, which is in modern-day Ukraine, which technically is not Russian territory. So they're not allowed to be on there unless they need something like a warm water port, and then they just invade and they take the flags off of their uniforms and do that like they did a couple of years ago. So I'm sure if they wanted to go check out the torpedo testing facility out there on the Caspian Sea, they could still do it. But I'm sure they stripped it of all valuables well before they abandoned it. And now it is just a giant structure in the middle of an otherwise untouched sea. And much like the rest of the things we talked about, and like the Caspian Sea Monster, they left it there. And there's no way Ukraine's going to pay to get it taken down. It's just going to be there until it crumbles into the sea floor. Or, maybe people go Metal Gear Solid 5 and take it over as a start of a international organization and use it as a staging operating area. I don't know.
Best example of all time is that, because that's exactly what it looks like.
That's what I'm thinking. Yeah, right. So that's my second one on the list there. Is that I thought that was interesting because not only is it a freestanding structure in the middle of basically a miniature ocean, but it's used to be used for torpedo testing and whatever else they could do out there in the ocean. But again, no one's using it now. If you want to go visit that, it might be a little bit more difficult than visiting the park with the shuttle on it, but it might be just as difficult as figuring out where the hell in Kazakhstan the Cosmodrome used to be. So who knows?
Yeah, or you could say this as an opportunity to turn to an Airbnb, so people can go pay a lot of money to go have sex and drink shitty coffee there, whatever.
There is, there is a place like that.
I do. There was it's off the coast of
It's like Carolina, right?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, and it's like it's an old oil place or something.
Yeah, they converted it and it has a helicopter landing pad on it, and that's how you get there. I mean, that's really cool. People just shoot guns off the side of it and shit because no one gives a fuck.
Yeah, just guns, golf balls, whatever.
Yeah,
just shooting guns.
I mean, I don't think I would like it that much to spend a weekend there because at some point you feel like you just kind of trapped on basically it's not really a fancy hotel. It's just an oil platform with beds in it. But it'd be cool to go there for I'd spend a day there. That'd be really cool to visit it.
Yeah, no, it'd be cool. And sleeping at night would be so eerie and weird, and you're really high up, and if you fell down, you'd die.
You would die, yeah.
Different ways, either just from the impact or from the fact that now you're in the middle of the fucking ocean.
Yeah, it is pretty isolated too. It's not like they can just come and get you if you have a medical emergency. They have to fly you out in a helicopter. So good luck with that. If anyone fucks up using a gun, which there's pretty likely out there when people are getting drunk as fucking shooting off the side of
That's
an
what
oil
I'm saying is you're wasted and you're I'm just gonna throw up off the edge, and then all of a sudden it's
then you're off the edge.
Black abyss.
Yeah, exactly.
Not good.
And obviously, if a hurricane was coming through, I wouldn't want to go visit that either. That's not where you want to be stuck.
Terrifying.
But that's the torpedo testing facility outside of Dagestan.
What's going on, cool cats? 'Tis the season to enjoy a little bit of the countryside. When I'm enjoying the countryside, I can't think of one thing better to pop into my gullet than New England's best IPA, courtesy of Wormtown Brewery. Don't worry. Why you worried? Be happy.
So my next on my list is the this is cool for one reason. I mean, a million reasons, but it's actually it's called the Myasishev M50, and the Myasishev M50 was a heavy Russian Soviet prototype 4-jet engine supersonic strategic bomber, similar to the shape, not really the shape, but it's a mix between a XB-70.
There it is.
A couple pictures, yeah, really, really sleek fucking thing. Another Russian bomber that resembled the Concorde in the way that.
It's supersonic and has that that nose shape like the Concorde.
The nose moving thing, and this it was the same thing. This is not same thing. This is a prototype, and it wasn't. It looks like a giant harpoon. It's a massive bomber. It's big. It went 1,200 miles an hour and had a range of 4,000 miles. So that's
a big range for something that big and fast.
Well, you got to think too. So the whole purpose of these is that if they're stationed on the west coast of Russia, they're within 30 minutes to Alaska, but they could bomb New York City.
You mean that would be the east coast of Russia? It's the west coast of America. Weirdly enough, because for us that's always west.
East coast of Russia. They're so close to Alaska that one they can bomb Alaska with a fighter jet too.
Yeah. Yeah, they don't even need that much range to do that.
No.
I mean, that bomber could, they could go down and bomb Los Angeles for that, that range.
Even Boston, New York City, you name it, it's M50, 4,000 miles range. You got this. Like,
you're right.
No problem. And it's supersonic until it drops its payload. And the crazy thing about this airplane is
it's supersonic until it drops its payload, and then it just kind of cruises back like, job done. Like, fuck you. You got out here in a hurry to start killing people. Now you're gonna cruise your way back.
Yep. Yeah. Well, it's
to conserve fuel, I imagine, is why they design it like that, right?
To drop it subsonic.
On the return flight is also supersonic.
Probably.
Oh, I see what you're saying. I thought they were gonna go supersonic, go subsonic to drop the payload, and then cruise back at subsonic speeds.
So
you're gonna get shot down on your way back. That's the case.
Fuel
right?
efficiency and like airspeed is that there's like, I forget the word for it, but it's so like hypersonic, supersonic, and then there's a subsonic range, but then there's like a certain window of like 100 miles an hour where it's the most inefficient area for an airplane to fly.
Really?
Right before the sound barrier, and then after this, you crack through the sound barrier, and after that, the airflow changes, the whatever it is, the airplane, like the SR-71 was a dog piece of shit under 800 miles an hour. Like, it burned fuel, leaked fuel, like it was a nasty nightmare of crap, and it flew like shit too. Like, it was like this big,
you just had to go super fast for it to become efficient.
2,000 miles an hour, it's like everything's mint.
That's so weird.
It's getting better fuel efficiency. It's like all this crazy shit, because a lot of ways that the engine works is like they have ramjets too. That's a whole other conversation. Ramjets are a different conversation.
Sure.
It doesn't even, the airplane.
So what happened to this one?
Yeah. So, it had some the usual things, problems, blah blah. I don't even know. It just never made it to full production.
Gotcha.
But it had test flights. It had the usual things. It's just sitting in a field with another bunch of like airplanes that don't work.
Wow.
Walk right up to it. But the coolest part about this one is that in the December 1st, 1958 issue of Aviation Week, there was an article about Soviet flight testing nuclear bomber. So the U.S. thought that this was nuclear powered. They didn't think that it was gas powered. So
really?
in Aviation Week.
So by nuclear bomber, they don't mean the payload; they mean the actual engine.
Yeah, it's a forever flying bomber. That's what they thought.
Terrifying.
Yeah, which does exist, and it's probably sitting in a field somewhere too.
I was going to say I didn't know that we had any of that. Obviously, that's how we utilized submarines and aircraft carriers now, but I'd never heard of an actual plane doing that.
So I got to do more research on an actual plane, but I know that there's a missile called the Harpoon, I believe, the like Russian Harpoon, and it's a forever flying nuclear missile bomb that, as it's flying, because it's releasing radioactive particles, so it circles a city and kills them by just existing. And
that's
then
horrifying.
eventually, and it will go forever until something happens to it, and if it does crash, it blows up, and it's like a nuclear bomb.
That's so fucked up.
Another thing, but anyways, the crazy thing is that I like this airplane about is that the Americans thought that, and it was in magazines, that this thing is a nuclear powered bomber that drops nuclear bombs.
Interesting speculation.
And that's just sitting there.
That's another crazy thing that would just be sitting there out in the field. You can go check it out now.
Yep.
Again, I imagine just more efficient and less expensive to fucking just leave it there than to dismantle the entire thing and recycle the parts or put them in a museum or something.
Yep.
That just seems to be just the way of things in the USSR there.
Yep, just put them there. So what do you got in store?
Next, I have the oldest abandoned thing that we've talked about so far, and that's the Terra ship graveyard, which is actually located northeast of Finland, which puts it squarely in the Arctic Circle. So this particular area is up in the Arctic Sea. 10 months out of the year, it's in complete freezing cold Arctic conditions. 2 months out of the year is what you'd consider almost like a Russian spring. I see that their record high temperature in July was 53 degrees Fahrenheit. So that's the hottest it's ever been in that particular area. The rest of the year, it's below freezing all year round. You can see the northern lights there. I see it. So some people in that area would usually travel to Finland or Norway to see that, but it's the same kind of area there, north as you can go. But this place used to be a fishery and a fishing wharf back in the day in the 1600s and 1700s. So they'd have all these wooden schooners and ships we talked about in the past out there, fishing and bringing it in, bringing the economy out there. Different times in history, this actually would have belonged to Finland because it's almost part of the same peninsula there in the northeast corner. But you know how Russia's always butting heads with that part of the world as well. And it's actually a lot larger. I'll bring up the map of this area too than you would think. That whole area. It's I always picture it as like a couple of little fingers coming across in Scandinavia, but they're just massive. And this whole area is like a whole block that could be its own country, but it's just one of Russia's far-reaching arms. Much like the whaling situation there, the fishing business was not the booming. And as the economy went down, all these fishing boats went out of business. And as they wrecked on the shoreline or as they were not maintained, they left them there. So there's dozens of old wooden ships all in this harbor, what they call the ship graveyard. So unlike the more modern things that are rusting away, these are wooden shipwrecks that are all along the shore. You can go there. They have a hotel in the area. So the town itself still exists, but say it again with me. After the fall of the Soviet Union, most of the economy tanked and all the people moved out of the area. So if you're going to that area, you're there to see the ship graveyard. That's basically all you're going there for. But you can still go. That I know for sure. There's still a tourist destination if you want to drive half a day out of any way of anything there. You can be more than welcome to see that. And I would suggest going on the time of the year that you can see the northern lights, because that's going to be what would actually be worth going to. This is going to be not as impressive as that, but it's still there if you want to see a bunch of old wooden ships.
So much fucking shit about the ship graveyard, man.
I'm sorry. It is cool.
It is
cool.
Not that great. The northern lights are better.
Well, I'm just saying, if you're going to drive for 12 hours out of your way, you better be going to see the northern lights. This will be a good side dish while you're there, you know? Yeah, it's interesting. And they're still there again, ringing the same bell over and over again. But they just figured these are all old shipwrecks. It's cool to still see them there. And why the fuck are we tearing them out of the water? There's just tons and tons of them there. And better to have the one reason for people to go visit to Burka. And there you go, the ship graveyard. So even though it's the oldest abandoned thing we had so far, it was still viable until the fall of the Soviet Union. And now the town's not a whole lot of its former self, but the ships are old wooden fishing boats from back in the day.
And you can also go there for the fish.
Of course, I'm sure the fish.
If
anything, there's probably more fish than ever now that the fishing's all dead.
Or maybe people don't. Maybe they perhaps think that the fish quality in Russia is the food is the fish are drinking the same water that this is drinking. So
no, I don't think it counts because it is actually attached to the ocean. This part, it's not just the Caspian Sea, so a little bit of circulation there in the Arctic
Ocean. A little better.
Yeah, but I don't hear what you're saying. I think once it makes it to market and they package it in whatever weird gelatin mold they pack it into, I wouldn't want to have it. But freshly caught, I think I would be all right to try on the shoreline there. I mean, if you caught it yourself, if you go from farm to table, as it were, with your own pole, I'd be okay with that. Beyond that, though, I don't know.
Just saying, the northern island that runs parallel to the whole fucking country of Russia, called Sarnia Island, is where they tested all the nuclear bombs, including the Tsar Bomba.
Absolutely.
So clear. That where those particles are going, going to the fish.
It's true. So, they're swimming them right up in their gills. All nice radioactivity.
Blowing up all these fish with nuclear bombs, and then you get to have your nice fish and chips with a side of French fries. That's
extra isotopes.
Yeah, right. So that's fascinating.
There's I have one more. Just a heads up for you.
Yeah. We can each throw in one more. That's pretty much all I got. I mean, I think I got an honorable mention as a second more, because my other ones are just other airplanes. I'm just a fuck about. Oop, drop a beer. Didn't drop a beer. That no one just some
good
cool
save.
shit.
He would never drop a B hoppy. Obviously, he caught it.
I didn't. I saved it. Always
Good
say
stuff.
to be hockey. Good fucking afternoon, guys. Today's episode is brought to you by B-Hoppy. Yeah, besides a lot of submarines, the biggest diesel sub in the world just sitting in a fucking field somewhere. Some cool fighter jets are just all over the fucking place.
But a lot of submarines is crazy too. Like massive, super important military technology, just fucking.
Just sitting there. Some of them are in this weird dry dock thing. Like, again, I'm just skimming these because I don't need to spend time on them.
Mm-hmm.
But,
I'm still glad you mentioned it though. Yeah, it's fascinating.
Oh yeah, like I'd say like a borderline of close to 100 submarines are just sitting around like in scrap yards. One of them it's the biggest diesel submarine ever. It's gigantic. It's just in a field. It's not even on a fucking like pallet. Like it's
in the grass.
On grass. Like it's just like put it on the grass.
Just dropped it off.
Throw rocks at it. Pretty cool.
Wow.
Oh yeah, like that one's super super cool. And that one specifically, pull it up just because we have to mention it. It's called Project 307 B641B, also known as the Catfish, biggest diesel submarine ever made.
Catfish.
Yep, the Catfish, and it actually is at the Avtovaz, which is a large technical museum, aka a field.
It's so large you can't even see the roof.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. Yep, this is the museum, and it was in a movie called Peculiarities of National Fishing. If you ever want to watch that Russian movie. So, anyways,
sounds great. Can't wait to sign up for that one. Is that on Netflix yet?
Yeah, we'll find out. Nick Flick.
Netflix.
Netflix. Check that out. Pretty cool. Yeah, and it was made in 1980, so it's not like it's that old. Anyways,
no.
My next thing is I don't know if it's more interesting, but it's called the Kola Super Deep Borehole, and it's abandoned.
Ooh, I think I came across this when I was looking at mine. I'm glad you brought it up.
Yep. So deep in Western Russia, if you know where to look, you'll find a shithole that has.
It sounds like the beginning of a nursery rhyme. Deep in Western Russia, if you know just where to look, you'll find a shithole. And then you'll find 20 more when you get to Moscow. Sorry, go ahead.
Exactly. And by shithole, I mean a small collection of scrap metal and crumpled concrete. It doesn't really get worse than that. Like, it's not that dumb.
Rubble. It looks like a heap of an exploded building.
Yeah, like imagine like a junkyard for cars, but like behind the junkyard, like there's always an area of just like metal. I don't know. Like, it's
just whatever bits and pieces of
stuff. Like that's pretty much what they're describing to me.
Hell yeah.
And then in that pile of shit, there's I'd say like a 2 foot in diameter circle piece of metal, like the end of a pipe that has a bunch of bolts holding it on. And you take the cap off that pipe and it goes down 12 kilometers.
Holy shit.
It is the deepest hole in the world, man-made.
Yeah, that is massive.
12 kilometers is deeper than the Marianas Trench from the surface. It was drilled in the 70s, and guess why they drilled it?
They were trying to steal the core of the earth and using some kind of super weapon.
Yeah, exactly right. Yeah, they were trying to drill down to America to be able to drop nuclear bombs better.
Yeah. They drop it from they'll never see it coming. They'll be watching the skies, but we come from underneath.
Yeah, right. It comes out of the ground.
Yeah, the mole people are gonna bomb you.
Yeah,
I wouldn't put it past them to design something like that. Honestly, it sounds crazy, but so does everything else.
Makes sense. No one's gonna,
Mm-hmm.
Seriously.
I mean, the only hitch is that it's going to take a lot more than 12 kilometers to make it to the other side. It's going to be impossible to do. But besides that, it's a good starting point.
It's a good start. No, it was drilled in the 70s just to find out more about the crust.
Wow, that's interesting. I mean, that's probably the most we ever know. How else could you find? I mean, obviously now we have other examples of erosion, so we can see what it might look like underneath. We have ground penetrating radar. We have ways to test it and shit like that. But what better way than to actually just drill down and be like, what the fuck is down there? And see how far we can go. Which gets increasingly more and more difficult the farther you go down, obviously.
Yeah, exactly. So
what do they do? Like just keep adding the end of the drill and just keep pushing it down and down and down. That's crazy.
I mean, I don't know if you're watching The Curse of Oak Island, but that's what they do in that. They just keep adding this. They're like oil digging platforms. That's what they do.
Yeah.
And they got to 7.5645431 miles by doing that thing.
Damn.
And at the bottom of that, almost 7.5 miles, they found water.
Water that far down.
Yeah.
Damn.
Weird.
Just hanging out down there.
Just hanging.
Not going anywhere.
Yep. So if you're ever in deep Western Russia and you know where to look, go check out the Kola Super Deep Borehole. Looks like a pipe.
Be careful not to fall in. You'll never get out.
Yep. No one's getting you.
If you fall out in a 100-foot well in Russia, there's a coin toss if they're going to get you out or not. If you fall down a 12-kilometer deep drill site, good night, nurse.
Good night.
You better hope you can make it to the bottom, though. If you get stuck halfway, that's going to be a rough way to go.
Yep.
Just tuck in your arms and legs like you're on a water slide and just let it rip.
Yeah, exactly. And just keep going.
I mean, that's going to be the biggest suicide jump you could possibly do. 7-mile jump. Where else can you jump from 7 miles high? Nowhere. There's not even a mile-high building, really. Is there? A mile high? I don't think there's any.
I don't know.
You have to go to a mountain
I
to
hate
get that high up.
And I can't imagine being on an elevator for a mile. It sounds awful.
A mile on an elevator? Yeah, it would take forever and
No
also
thanks.
be terrifying.
Yeah, terrifying. A side note, I was watching a documentary and it was in Australia or something, and they got a lot of, it's relevant to holes, understanding of, it had something to do with Neanderthals because they found Neanderthal bones down there that were older than what we previously thought. And it's just this giant hole in the woods that animals and former humans fell into. So it's just a collection of bones. So they're like, holy shit, there's this hole that just animals are going and they go, woo, they're down. And then
it's a collection of all the unfortunate souls who fell in.
Exactly. And there's like thousands of them in there over the past, 15,000 years. Just at least one a day is going down there. So it's just like this, just bones everywhere.
That's horrifying.
I thought that was a pretty cool way they're like, yeah, we got some species we never even knew about because they just fell in this hole and then were preserved.
That's so cool. It's like an old trap door, but it's
like Earth's trap of like
Earth trap door.
Like letting people know these things used to exist. So
that's crazy.
Yes,
I just looked up the Burj Khalifa is the tallest building. I couldn't remember the name of it,
Middle East.
but that is 2,700 feet. So that's about a half a mile only, and that's the tallest skyscraper in the world by a large margin. So, I mean, that's half of a 1 mile, and then multiply that by 14. That's what you're talking about for the drill site. It's a deep hole.
Yeah, that's a deep hole, man. Real deep.
Jesus, I'm sure it's plenty dark too. After 100 feet, it'd be tough to see any light coming in at all. So then you get 7 more miles to go to the bottom.
Yeah, and I don't know if you watch videos of people dropping things in some of these holes because they exist other places. They make the weirdest sounds. You drop a beer
Just
bottle
the
down,
echoes.
it all of a sudden starts to sound like lasers.
That's
like,
cool.
Ding ding ding. Pew, 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 pew. Like does stuff like that.
Wacky shit.
So what do you got?
So sorry. So next I have my last abandoned mark here, and then I have one guy I wanted to mention just because he reminded me of all these abandoned vehicles and things. But this one is the abandoned tank yard of Ukraine. Going back to Ukraine once again.
Hot.
Hidden away in a small town in eastern Ukraine, about 20 miles from the Russian border again, in the former Soviet Union. This would be part of the Soviet Union, so they would put this shit there. Lies a yard full of Russian tanks. During the height of the Soviet Union, they used it as a storage facility and repair facility for all of their tanks on that part of the world. And as of right now, there is about 400 decommissioned tanks in the location, just sitting there, just hanging the fuck out. The tank graveyard is dotted with armed guards and is not open to the public. Even the location is not listed on public maps and things, so they don't want people going around and fucking with all these tanks that it used to be. So they're not live. They don't have live ammunition in them, but they're just 400 previously used Russian tanks. I think most of them, it says, are T-72 tanks, so they're made after World War II there. But they made a ton of them. But thanks to some ballsy, insane, speaking of the wherewithal of people who live in this part of the world, some 18-year-old kid went in there with his phone and took a bunch of pictures of it, the area. So we'll put some of those up for the podcast just to take a look.
Yeah.
So it's in all different degrees of decomposition. Some of them are fully formed tanks. Some of them are just scrap parts all over the place, but it's just this massive facility. So even though they do have armed guards at the location, it's just such a large place that it'd be tough to really spot people sneaking in and out of there unless you're, on high alert. But I'm sure these guys are just hanging out there, and it's not a super secure location, but I still wouldn't want to get shot just checking out old tanks. But I thought that was really cool because when the Soviet Union fell one more time, now it was in Ukraine, and the whole facility was in Ukraine, so they could have started using it for themselves and using all these tanks, but it just cost so much money to maintain, and they were broker than a joke after leaving the Soviet Union. So they decided just scrap the whole thing. We're not going to utilize it. We don't want anyone using it against us. So tank those tanks, and they still remain there now. About 400 decommissioned Soviet tanks sitting there in the Ukraine, if you can find them.
So
let's wrap it up, kids.
So I think to wrap this all up, it's just gotta be mentioned. You know where I'm going with this.
Gorillas, right? We haven't mentioned them yet. I'd say some shit.
I'm saying some shit. We got gorillas.
Hell yeah.
No, we don't have gorillas going on right now.
What do we have?
We do have something called the elephant foot.
Oh, the elephant foot. How could I
come
forget?
up before, my friend.
It has during our atomic age doomsday talk. I think we talked about it during the Sun in a Box episode.
Box, my friend. Sun in a box.
We're talking about Pripyat, another Ukrainian spot.
Yeah, Pripyat specifically was on my first topic, but you can't talk about Pripyat if you didn't talk about why it was there. Pripyat, it was a town for 30,000 people or something. It's pretty big, maybe 15.
Yeah, was being the operative word there.
Well, I mean, it is still. It's there.
It isn't there. Yeah, it's still there. Just no one's there
Chernobyl
anymore.
blew up in 1986, and there's a town that was built around it to house the workers.
Chernobyl.
And that town was called Pripyat. And Chernobyl, as we mentioned before, nuclear power plants, big giant cover-up. But in Sweden, they had detectors in the air that said something blew up somewhere, and we think it's Chernobyl because they're not telling us. They literally have things in their windows that pick up on background radiation or particles or something. And so there's again no gorillas here, but about the size of a gorilla is something called the elephant foot, and it's a big, giant, solidified, molten puddle of lead,
radioactive metals. Yeah, that just melted together during the superheat.
It's so.
We'll bring up the picture of it. We have it from the last podcast we did about it, but it's so difficult to even get a photo of it because of the amount of radiation coming off of it.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, because the photos look like they're all being dunked underwater because the amount of radiation in the proximity to it is so crazy that you can't even get pictures of it. It's just so cool.
And we talked about it in the past, but the whole area is just uninhabitable and will be for thousands and thousands of years in the future. It's the abandoned city. That's probably our biggest abandoned thing. Yeah, the elephant foot in particular, but the entire city is abandoned. Unlike these small villages that got left behind when whaling went away or when the Cold War lapsed, it's just this haunted city that is only inhabited by wildlife now because it's just too dangerous and radioactive to still be inhabited.
Yeah, the blue dogs of Chernobyl are real. And it's crazy. And in Pripyat, they've got everything you could ever imagine: swimming pools, amusement parks,
Ferris wheels, famously.
Ferris wheels, dolls, a lot of schools full of dolls.
Schools, homes,
dolls everywhere.
Creepy old kid stuff.
Old kid shit from the 80s. That's terrifying. That's now radioactive.
Makes for a great horror movie footage and stuff.
If you want now, I believe one of the airlines now will fly you over it. If you are too scared to go there and sneak in, you can get an airline that will specifically detour out of its path to go fly over Chernobyl. You can pay money to do that now.
I hope that the bottom of that plane is lead lined, but I feel like that would be kind of
yeah, I think it's fine.
Inhibition for actually wanting to fly up that high.
Yeah. The airplanes don't like weight.
No, you wouldn't want to add a bunch of lead on the plane.
No, definitely not.
Get the lead out.
Yeah, so that's Pripyat. I think they're allowing people sort of in there now. It's like a weird.
You can go to like the outskirts and stuff, and there's like tours and things that'll still bring you around there. And they they bring the Geiger counters around and make sure there's different pockets of radiation, stuff like that. You still couldn't pay me to go do that. Fuck that. There's just way too many cool things, not only on the planet, but on this list I would rather see before going to Chernobyl. I've seen enough of footage about it. I don't need to go there and see it in person. I'd rather go see the Caspian Sea Monster or the tank graveyard than go to the fucking Chernobyl disaster area.
I can't say I wouldn't go, especially if they're telling you that it's safe. Like there's
just like they told all the people who lived there that week. Fucking Russian government. I trust them. Fuck that. We only know about it now because we had to uncover it over the past 3 decades. They were hiding all the information about it from their own people. Never mind the American government. I'm sure it's not as dangerous as it was initially, but I still wouldn't take their fucking word for it.
Yeah, no, I hear you that. But you're carrying stuff, and you look at the Roentgens.
It's not 3 Roentgen. It's 15,000.
Roentgens.
They're like Rotgens or something like that.
Roentgens. Roentgens. That's how what's his face says it in the show Chernobyl too. He goes Roentgens.
What about radiation?
Obviously down here it's nothing, but in the reactor building I'm being told 3.6 Roentgen per hour.
And so I think if you're exposed for just not a lot of time, and obviously you can't go into the old. They built this structure around it, so you can't go inside of the old power plant.
Right, which makes sense.
It's like a containment structure, but I was wrong. Some facts about from January 1st, 1986, before it blew up. There was 49,400 people living.
Wow, it's even more
Pripyat,
people.
and the average age was 26. Scattered across 13,000 apartments in 160 apartment blocks, 15 kindergartens, 5 secondary schools, 1 hospital that could only account for 410 patients, which sounds like 3 ICU beds or something like that.
Sure, got overwhelmed within the first 2 hours of the disaster. Never mind the subsequent month, 2 months, 3 months.
Oh yeah, for real. And then 25 stores and malls, 27 cafes, 10 warehouses that could hold 4,400 tons of gold. It's goods.
Or uranium. If you got
uranium,
enough.
Yeah. But there just wasn't a whole lot. There was like, cinema, arts stuff, 10 gyms, 10 shooting galleries.
There we go.
3 indoor swimming pools, 2 stadiums, 1 park, 35 playgrounds.
2 stadiums and 1 hospital, kind of a shitty ratio there, I think, even without the disaster happening. I think you should have at least as many hospitals as you do sporting arenas, just for the safety of the people in your community. That's just me.
I think so too. Yeah, I agree with that.
Shouldn't have 3 football stadiums and 1 hospital is a bad ratio. How you give a shit about people who live in your area.
Well, and like I said, based off what I'm reading, I can't totally tell, but it sounds like it has. I said 3 clinics, so it has 1 hospital and then like 3 primary care facilities.
Oh, gotcha.
But
so like if
that hospital has 410.
That's
beds,
so tiny.
A small percentage of that will be ICU. Like there'll be like 10 ICU beds or something, and that every single one of those were sucked up immediately once the burns decided to eat away the flesh and kill those people in the most horrific way to die on Earth.
Absolutely.
Your skin falls off.
And then never mind the following months, and then all the people who had children following the disaster who had all kinds of genetic disorders, and it's just upwards of more people than even lived in that city were affected by the disaster for years and years afterwards.
Yeah, and downwind from the city in other countries. I mean, it affected everything.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, we talked about it during the Sun in the Box episode, but I mean, nuclear radiation is just the worst
Not
shit.
good. Not good news.
And it's the worst shit that humans are really capable of, just because of the fact that it's so widespread, the suffering, and it's so everlasting. It really is opening up Pandora's box. You can't fucking get it closed. And every time something like that happens, not only is it, like we said, it's far-reaching effects, it's unstoppable effects. This is going to be 10,000 years before you're even going to be able to walk towards that facility in anything less than a complete radiation suit, and you'll still never be able to have kids again after that. It's just crazy how long lasting the effects are.
Crazy town. It's nuts.
Oh, thanks.
So
the last thing I want to talk about was also had to do with the end of the Soviet Union, and it's the first person that came to mind when I thought of all these abandoned vehicles. I go, how the fuck did they leave all this shit everywhere? We got cargo planes, we got space shuttles left around, we have submarines left in fields. How the hell do they have all this extra shit after the fall of the USSR? And that's just the issue. Not only was the economy busted, they had a ton of metal vehicles that they had left over with. And what are you going to do? Fucking sell them if you can. Obviously, they're super dangerous vehicles to be dealing out in the world. But not only does the country of Russia have the shit left over, all these smaller states have. We're talking about people in Belarus and Ukraine with no money. They get fucking 400 tanks over there, trying to make a buck pretty quick. So that brought up Ludwig Feinberg, a.k.a. Tarzan, was his nickname. Now, he's a Ukrainian man who left the Soviet Union for Israel. You know who this guy is?
Didn't even think you were going to go here.
I had to.
Exactly who Tarzan is.
So, yeah. So he left the Soviet Union for Israel in the 80s. This is still during the height of the Cold War in the Soviet Union. He moved to the United States after the fall of the Soviet Union and became a huge drug kingpin for the Colombian cartel. So he was super intricately connected there. Had to do with all kinds of thing about organized crime, whatever it is. He was fucking involved with it. That was his deal. So he comes up with this bright idea that sounds like a great idea for a guy who's super coked up and a millionaire. And he decides to go back to the Soviet Union and try to purchase a submarine so that he can
not like
a military grade Soviet diesel submarine that you would use in warfare against America.
As torpedo. And the only question they asked him was, do you want it with torpedo or without?
Exactly. Do you want it armed or not armed?
That was what
they were going to load it up with weaponry.
That was the answer. The response was, do you want one with torpedoes or one without torpedoes?
Yeah, so they were going to sell him a fucking diesel sub that was still functional. He also said when he went there that they offered him a helicopter for $500, so he bought 10 of them. $500 for a Soviet helicopter. Bought 10.
To have that money must be so funny.
All the U.S. dollar worth a lot of that, especially when you have all this leftover shit.
10
military helicopters.
Military helicopters.
$5,000. You can get 10 helicopters.
Yeah, I'll take.
That's the fall of the Soviet Union. That's the whole fucking podcast, man. So, anyways, he unfortunately was being tracked by the DEA and the American government the whole time. So he actually didn't end up being able to follow through with that transaction, even though it was a great idea.
Imagine if he did.
Imagine if he did. We would have had a Soviet sub coming up, much like the stories in the past. But this one's full of fucking cocaine and hookers. That's what I'm talking about. Yep. So he's currently in jail in Panama. He was found on guilty of charges for smuggling, racketeering, and pimping. And that's Tarzan.
Yeah, he definitely liked his strippers and prostitutes. That's a fact.
Sure did.
I watched that show.
Mm-hmm.
The prostitutes, the drugs, the fights with the people, the FBI agents.
Yeah, if you want to check it out, they made a documentary called
they knew
Project
each other
Odessa.
so well that there was no it just happened to be the case that now I can buy a sub, a diesel electric, legit like narco
a war machine
thing. In South America, they use these they look like fucking steel pipes that somehow they made into submarines, and they're pretty cool, but they're not.
Those are the janky ass built at home ones.
Yeah, that the Russians were using at the prime of the Cold War to defeat the United
These
States.
Things costed millions and millions of dollars to develop and then build and operate, and they were selling to this guy to fucking smuggle cocaine into the United States.
So
and they were gonna give him it with the fucking missiles and torpedoes and everything else too. It's great.
It's
the radar still works. We're looking for Red October.
There you go. Is he dead yet? Yeah, he is, right?
I think he died just this last year. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, just checking. Sean Connery, for those who don't understand Joe's reference.
Sean Connery died last year. He was in the hunt for October.
It's great. It's funny. I think that's
It's Russian accent. It's not an accent. It's just like a Scottish accent.
But when you're a Russian submarine commander and you're Sean Connery at the same time, you don't have to have Russian accent.
Anyways, that's Russia for you, baby. Das Vidanya, everybody.
That's the Dylan and Joe Basement Podcast. We're your hosts, Basement Dylan.
Comrade Joseph.
Comrade Joseph.
Das Vidanya Spaceship for listening to the podcast. If you want to drive half a day out of any way of anything there, you can be more than welcome to see that. And I would suggest going on the time of the year that you can see the northern lights, because that's going to be what would actually be worth going to. This is going to be not as impressive as that, but it's still there if you want to see a bunch of old
talk
ships.
So much fucking shit about the ship graveyard, man.
I'm sorry. It is cool. It is
like
cool.
Not that great. The northern lights are better.
Well, I'm just saying, if you're going to drive for 12 hours out of your way.
Strapped on the cable into the back of it. Yeah.
Great success.
Great success. Very, very nice.
Very nice. Very big.
I don't even know. Like, a soccer ball has a certain point that's just crap. Orbit transfers, it just makes the whole thing. But anyway, so Kazakhstan's a good place.
Come on, Dylan. This isn't rocket science. What don't you get about it?
It's not brain surgery. And guess why they drilled it?
They're trying to steal the core of the Earth and using some kind of super weapon.
Yeah, exactly right. Yeah, they were trying to drill down to America to build drop nuclear bombs.
Yeah. They drop it from the. They'll never see it coming. They'll be watching the skies, but we come from underneath.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Comes out of the ground.
Yeah, the mole people are gonna bomb you.
Yeah.
I wouldn't put it past them to design something like that. Honestly, it sounds crazy, but so does everything else.
Makes sense.
What's going on, fans of the Dylan Joe Basement Podcast? That's right, we got a new sponsor, the best sponsor in town, the best beer in town, the best beer of all time. We have Wormtown's own, the Hoppy. Whenever I'm sitting by my porch, or taking my nice new kayak out on the Assabet River, I listen to the sounds of gunshots ringing into the ocean mist, to the riverside, and I have to think to myself, don't worry. Why am I worried? I should be happy.